Good morning. Welcome to News Center Maine's Political Brew. Glad you could be with us. We have with us a couple of gentlemen who were present at the creation of this segment many years ago. Former Republican State Senator Phil Harriman, former Democratic State Senator, and former Mayor of Portland, Ethan Strimling. Good to see you, gentlemen. What have you been up to lately?
Good to see you, Pat. We've been doing quite a bit, as you know. Phil and I have started a new podcast over at News Center Maine. Comes out every Thursday. Agree to Disagree. You actually joined us a couple of weeks ago on the hot seat. You did pretty well on your predictions, by the way. I'm not sure if you checked them out.
I was happy to get some good grades on that. A lot going on, and of course, the biggest political bombshell, an unexpected one, Friday night when U.S. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. She was someone who spent her career fighting for justice, gender equality, and she, of course, had said apparently to her family that she hoped that her successor would not be chosen and seated until after the next president is inaugurated. However, Mitch McConnell, in his condolence statement, came right out hours after her death saying, we will vote on the Trump nominee. President Trump has signaled that he will make one swiftly. So, Phil, let me start with you. What's your political take on all this? It seems like this is a moment of truth for Senate Republicans and Susan Collins in particular.
Yes, Pat, that's true. But first, let me just take a brief moment to celebrate the life of Justice Ginsburg. Our politics probably weren't aligned, but my respect and admiration for the things that she stood for equality, particularly for women's rights in the workplace, should be celebrated. And I just want to take a moment to do that. To the political side of it, I understand why Justice Ginsburg made that request through her children that her replacement be appointed after the election, but she doesn't get to decide that. That's constitutionally up to the president. And even if he does move swiftly, which in Washington we know is a relative term, I don't know how you get someone vetted, nominated, hearings, votes done in the next 5 weeks. I just don't think that's practical.
Ethan, do you think Susan Collins is on a hot seat here that she'd rather not be on?
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, if she's smart, what she'll do is she will try to use some of the bipartisanship that she claims she has and go to her colleagues to make clear to Mitch McConnell, we do not want this to become a big political football. We need to let this settle down. You know, it's the height of hypocrisy that Mitch McConnell, who refused to consider a nomination from Barack Obama because it was 10 months out from Election Day, that he would now be considering a nomination from President Trump 6 weeks out. So I hope that Susan Collins will try to calm things down, use the power that she has earned, and we'll try to stop this nomination, wait till the next president gets seated.
Phil, it would take 4 Republican senators to break ranks to block this. You had a number of senators, Lindsey Graham, Marco Rubio, who came out 4 years ago and agreed with McConnell saying, no, we're too close to an election. We're going to let the voters pick the next president, and he can then pick the next justice.
You know, and this is a good example, at least from my perspective, of the honor that you have to serve in elective office. This shouldn't be about partisan politics. It should be about the honor and duty of how we treat each other, whether you're a legislator or just an ordinary citizen. I actually buy into Ethan's premise that if it was Barack Obama had the chance to appoint someone and McConnell wouldn't let it happen, he shouldn't do it in this instance just for the sake of democracy and common decency.
We will see how this plays out. Let's turn our eyes to Augusta, where there are more than 30 uncontested legislative seats, most of them held by Democrats. Ethan, why do you think those seats are not being challenged?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons. Obviously, it's hard to get people to run for the legislature. It's always hard to get people to run for the legislature. I think in COVID, it's hard as well. Obviously, Republicans fell a little bit more by the wayside in terms of their efforts. I do think there's not as much sort of energy and excitement about Republicans these days. You know, people are feeling a little discouraged. The president's got low favorable numbers. I'm sure that had some impact. I think it's also important that Democrats recognize that, you know, there were a number of these seats that Republicans did not fill that we're not going to go Republican. A bunch of them are in the city of Portland. The city of Portland is not going to send a Republican legislator to the state house. So, you know, we can't be complacent. The competitive seats are the ones that we have to fight for. Both sides, I think, understand that.
So, Phil, how unusual is it to have this many uncontested seats?
Well, 20 years ago, it was not that uncommon for Republicans not to be able to fill all 186 legislative seats with competitive races. I think part of it this time around is that the COVID epidemic probably dissuaded some from running. The Republican Party spent a lot of energy on ranked choice voting. And I think strategically, they're probably wise to say, look, let's not try to unseat someone in the city of Portland. Let's use those resources of time and talent and campaign contributions in areas where we are competitive. And if that is the tactic, they may surprise people on election day.
The governor this past week signed a curtailment order, which essentially slows spending for the next quarter because of the pandemic and the budget shortfalls. But I think you both would probably agree that the real challenge here is getting the legislature back to work, Phil.
Yeah, no question about it. As I've commented on Political Brew since probably March or April, May maybe, that the governor needed to take this action because clearly revenues are off by hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. I'm glad she finally did it. But as you alluded to in your question, Pat, this is just like trimming the sails. This isn't an outright repeal of expenditures because she doesn't have the authority to do that. The legislature still has to come in and do their work. And the question becomes, is Sarah Gideon going to be part of an effort to bring the legislature back where she's not going to be able to go out and campaign, and she's going to have to cast votes that may not serve her well in her election? She's in a very difficult position, I think.
Ethan, does Speaker Gideon get some of the blame here for not coming back to work?
Speaker Gideon's voted every time there's been a vote to bring the legislature back into session. So it's the Republicans who refused to vote, didn't even participate, weren't even willing to say no, who really deserve the blame here, unfortunately. And that's just a factual statement. It's not partisan. It's very partisan to say that Sarah Gideon somehow deserves the blame when Republicans don't even vote. What the legislature does need to come back, and Republicans should step up and they should vote yes, or Governor Mills should bring them back in. She can't do big dramatic cuts. She can't do big dramatic tax increases, revenue increases, nor should she. That should be a full process of the Democratic legislature coming together. So I really hope that legislators do step up and vote to say, you know what, we need to examine this budget. We need to figure out other ways that we can invest in our economy to help bring it back and to make sure that we protect our residents.
It seems unlikely before the election, however.
Gentlemen, we didn't get to talk right after the Senate debate a week ago, so I'd like to get your take on the showdown between Susan Collins, Sarah Gideon, Max Linn, and Lisa Savage. Phil, start with you.
Well, Max Linn basically pulled himself out of the race from his opening statements rejecting the moderator's question. I don't know how you keep your patience, Pat, with that sort of behavior. I think he is essentially... his race is over. Lisa Savage, I thought handled herself exceptionally well. In fact, there were several times during the debate that you moderated, Pat, that Susan Collins and Lisa Savage acknowledged that they agreed with each other. And I thought that was very telling and very welcoming by the audience, because all we hear is this, toxicity towards one another. I thought Sarah Gideon held her own. She didn't make any fundamental mistakes. And it's easier when you're the challenger because you don't have a record that you got to defend, which leads me to Susan Collins. I thought she did an exceptionally good job. She was poised, she was measured, she had responses, and she showed why, with her 24 years of experience, why it's so important that we have someone in the U.S. Senate at this point in time with that sort of experience.
What's your takeaway, Ethan?
I think that both Sarah and Susan actually did very well. I'd give them both B pluses. I don't think anybody got an A. There were no knockout punches, nothing like that. But they both were solid. Susan Collins came out, and she is who, she's often been in these debates. She didn't make any mistakes, and that was very important. And Sarah Gideon, first time really introduced to Maine voters. I think she had a very good grasp of the issues. She was more than capable of being able to respond, off the cuff. So I think the two of them, solid B pluses. I think Lisa Savage, I think she was good. I think she's got to get clearer in terms of what her message is. So I'd give her more of a B minus. Just hammer one message and keep going. Max Linn, he's in detention at the moment, like Phil said. I'm not sure his campaign was ever anything, but it certainly is nothing now.
A national survey out this week covering every state says Governor Janet Mills of Maine has 54% approval rating for handling the pandemic response, but it's the lowest for any governor in New England. Now, given our track record on the number of cases and fatalities, Ethan, wouldn't you expect Janet Mills' number perhaps to be higher here?
You know, it has been higher in other polls, and this was a little bit of an outlier. Most of the other polls we've seen have had her around 60% or a little bit higher. Because I think she has done a very good job, and I think people feel pretty good about the work that she's done. I would say the one criticism I would give her that's been different for other governors is she hasn't been out front as much as the other governors. She hasn't been at the press conferences every time they're happening, being the one answering questions, being out front, being that leader. She's much more behind the scenes. And I do think that at times like this, you really want your leader to be front and center, hear from her directly. And I think that may be the one piece that she hasn't done as well as she should have.
What do you think, Phil?
Well, you know, I'm surprised that her rankings are the lowest in New England because, for example, Massachusetts has had just a terrible challenge with this COVID-19 virus. But having said that, it seems to me that if you wake up every day and all you were concerned about is the virus, then Janet Mills has probably responded in a way in which you've given her high marks. If you wake up every day and wonder when you're going to get back to your normal lifestyle, and are we really all in this together when some people are able to take advantage of the circumstances and others are forced to shut down or constrict their activities, you're probably feeling like, on balance, the governor really has not created an environment where we are all in this together.
And leaders have to take the heat for that.
Yes.
Finally, in the 2nd Congressional District, the NRA has endorsed Republican challenger Dale Crafts. However, locally, the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine is not giving an endorsement, saying that both incumbent Jared Golden and Dale Crafts have A-plus records. Phil, why the split? Do you think this means, at least for that race, for the 2nd District congressional seat, the guns are not an issue?
Well, I think further complicating this is that Dale Crafts sits on the board of directors of the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine, which tells me that that must have been a very difficult decision for them not to endorse someone. And clearly, Jared Golden, through his track record in the legislature and in Congress, has not done anything that would cause the sportsmen of Maine, not the people who believe in the Second Amendment, but the sportsmen of Maine have no reason to pick a horse in the race.
What do you think, Ethan?
Yeah, this is a big split. You know, these organizations really work hand in hand all the time. And for Sam not to endorse Dale is a pretty big deal. I expect part of it is because, certainly it's because Jared Golden on the issue of guns has been much more moderate, much more in the vein of Mike Michaud. But I expect that they also recognize that Jared Golden is probably going to win this race. Dale Crafts has not run a very good campaign. You barely know who he is. Recent polling that just came out said a third of voters in CD2 didn't know him. And to be 6 weeks out of Election Day and a third of voters don't know who you are, that's a real problem.
All right, finally, our winners and losers in politics this week. Phil, the honor is yours.
Oh, thank you, Pat. Welcome back, Ethan.
Thank you.
My loser of the week is the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, who, when asked to comment on the president's successful peace accord with United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, said it was just a distraction from the pandemic. I adamantly disagree. I think that was historic. And my winner of the week, Pat, this week, the students and the teachers who are demonstrating through their deeds that we can get back to school and a normal lifestyle, and they're my heroes of the week.
And Ethan.
Oh, very nice. Yeah, my loser of the week. I mean, who else? Who lost more than Max Linn? He's pretty much done. And as Phil said earlier, it just was really a terrible performance. And look, we know politicians try to avoid answering questions all the time. It's an art in the United States to do that. And he was not artful about it and did a terrible job. So he was the loser of the week. Same debate. I'm actually going to say that Sarah Gideon was the winner of the week. Again, it wasn't a knockout blow, but she really needed to come across as understanding the issues and making clear that she could stand on the same stage with the kind of stature that Maine expects from their U.S. senators. And she did that. So good job.
All right, Ethan Strimling, Phil Harriman, thanks so much for being with us. Thank you for watching Political Brew. We'll see you next time. News Center Maine is back after this.